So I'm going to formally open the February 9th, 2021 State Land Board meeting. I am pleased to welcome our new Secretary of State, Shamia Fagan. She was elected to the post in November of last year and was sworn in earlier this year, and we're just delighted to have her serve on the State Land Board. I know it's a hot topic when you're running for this particular office to talk about the Land Board, and Secretary Fagan, welcome, and I'm glad to have you join us.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate it.
Normally when there's a new land board, we take photos. I imagine that won't happen for a while. Director Walker, maybe we can get a photo of the three of us in Zoom land just to capture this moment for posterity, for historical posterity. But I'm hoping that at some point in the next year, we'll be able to get a group photo of the land board in its current configuration.
That would be great, Governor.
All right. With that, the first item on the consent agenda is a request for approval of the minutes of the December 8th, 2021 Land Board meeting. Treasurer Reed, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, happy to make the motion. Do you want to do them en masse or one at a time?
I'm happy to do them en masse, but it may not. We may get through the consent agenda before we fix our video issue, but let's go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry, Governor, I'm not sure. Do you want me to make the motion for the first one? Okay. Madam Chair, I move approval of the minutes for the December 8th, 2020, not 2021.
2021. Thank you. Mistake on my agenda. It's Treasurer Reed has moved approval of the minutes of the December 8th, 2020 meeting of the State Land Board. Is there a second?
I will second, Governor.
Thank you, Secretary Fagan. Hearing a second, the motion is approved. Director Walker, could you walk us through item number 2, the Malheur County land donation due diligence?
I can. Thank you, Governor. And I apologize. The agenda had a typo and we didn't catch that. We will correct that on the website. Agenda item 2 is a request for approval to initiate due diligence regarding the potential acquisition through donation of 2,690 acres of irrigated meadowlands and dry rangelands known as the Disaster Peak Ranch, located in southern Malheur County, through a donation from the Western Rivers Conservancy. This property would be managed for cattle grazing and conservation of the Lahontan cutthroat trout, which is a federal endangered species, and also the state fish of Nevada. The authorities are set out below. I know you're slammed on your agenda. I have quite a bit to talk about with regard to this property, so let me try to move through that quickly. In the fall of 2019, Western Rivers Conservancy, known as WRC, approached DSL with a request for us to consider, the agency to consider accepting the transfer or donation of 2,690 acres of land they were acquiring from a private entity on McDermott Creek in southern Malheur County. The purpose of that acquisition was so they could secure ownership of one of the last remaining isolated strongholds in the northern Great Basin of the Lahontan cutthroat trout. This fish species is a federally listed endangered species, and it is on the brink of extinction, only found in a very few waters. WRC intends to work with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife on various species-specific restoration projects with the hopes of creating a meta population reconnecting 55 miles of contiguous stream. The restoration process will involve the removal of invasive cutthroat trout and recolonizing the stream with genetically pure strains of Lahontan cutthroat trout, and they are which are in the headwaters above the man-made fish barriers. Transfer to the department will ensure the property will be in public ownership and secure access for restoration efforts. In September of 2020, and I see you're all starting to appear on my screen. That's great. In September of 2020, WRC closed on the acquisition and now officially owns the Disaster Peak Ranch. The ranch consists of the 2,690 acres in Oregon and 655 acres in Nevada near the small town of McDermott, which sits on the Oregon-Nevada border. WRC is working with the Nevada Department of Lands to transfer by donation the acres existing in Nevada into their ownership. The acreage in Oregon includes 1,449 acres of irrigated meadowland, 1,241 acres of dry rangeland, 2 home sites, 1 including an historic barn and corral, as well as outbuildings. If you go out on YouTube, you can find video pictures of the ranch. The Disaster Peak Ranch has been operated as a family-owned working cattle ranch for more than 50 years, spanning 3 generations. In the opinion of ODFW and WRC, the family has been excellent land stewards and managed the land in a manner consistent with a sustainable grazing operation, benefiting watershed health, promoting and enhancing wildlife habitat. The private lands and meadow are in excellent condition. The ranch lies at the foot of the Trout Creek Mountains, and Disaster Peak is a summit in the mountains range that was named after an 1864 confrontation between prospectors and the Paiute tribe. That little bit of history came from the treasurer's office, so thank you. WRC currently leases the cattle grazing of approximately 750 head annually on the property, and in conjunction with the neighboring Bureau of Land Management permit, the Zimmerman allotment, on approximately 33,000 acres. That number of cattle is approximately 1/3 of the allowable use and 2/3 of the stocking rate on the meadow property. In general, the property is considered lightly or moderately used. Due to the grazing permit, cattle grazing is really the most desirable use of this property in the long term. And WRC approached DSL about this proposition because we have experience with staff to manage these lands for those purposes of cattle grazing. We have tens of thousands of acres similar to that in Southeast Oregon. WRC will retain approximately 160 acres of the ranch to allow the BLM grazing permit to stay in their name, because the state of Oregon through DSL cannot own those grazing permits. WRC entered into short-term lease agreements with one of the former owners of the ranch, as well as the current cattle grazing lessee, to continue ranch operations. The irrigated meadowland has 33 cubic feet a second of in-stream or surface water rights on McDermott Creek, used to flood irrigate the meadow in the spring and early summer. There are 19 in-stream stock watering rights in various locations. This is a prime piece of property. In the future management of the ranch under DSL would remain unchanged, and it would be managed through a forage lease containing a leasehold management plan with the lessee and in partnership with ODFW and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. WRC acquired the property using a grant from the Cooperative Endangered Species Conservation Fund, Section 6 of the ESA, and therefore those requirements would be incorporated into the leasehold management plan. Those requirements are listed out below. I won't go through those. If acquired, this parcel will be incorporated into the DSL U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Candidate Conservation Agreement with assurances for the management of sage grouse habitat. McDermott Creek and the Trout Creek Mountains have been identified as a sage grouse stronghold and a priority area of conservation by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So this property is really a gem in terms of protecting wildlife. If the property were transferred to us, the Section 6 requirements could be imposed as deed restrictions. The deed will likely not allow any mining of any sort, infrastructure, or renewable energy. The current and best use is certainly the grazing, and that is what DSL is hoping will help fund the property, because we certainly don't want to take over the property and have it cost money to the school fund. Our due diligence will be conducted per DSL's rules governing the sale, exchange, and purpose of land, as well as the guidance outlined in the 2012 Real Estate Asset Management Plan. Considerations will include operating budgets, returns on the property, coordination with local and state agencies, and a number of other things. I would tell you that I am extremely impressed with what I read about the work of the WRC. They operate in 11 Western states, and their organization is dedicated exclusively to saving rivers through land acquisition by working with willing sellers and private landowners, and then finding long-term stewards like DSL. I did not know so much about this organization, and Governor and members of the Land Board, I think this would be a great partnership. If you'd like to learn more about the Lahontan cutthroat trout, there's a great YouTube video called Fish of the People, Lahontan cutthroat trout at Summit Lake, that will talk to you about how the trout is essential to the cultural aspects of the Paiute tribe. It is the department's enthusiastic recommendation that the Land Board approve initiating due diligence for the potential acquisition of 2,960 acres of irrigated meadow and dry range land in southern Malheur County for the purposes of cattle grazing and the conservation of this fine species, the Lahontan cutthroat trout.
Thank you, Director Walker. We're getting a lot of static from your microphone. I don't know if you're too close and could push that back a little bit if we can.
I'll try that. Okay. Does that help?
Not much.
We'll try a different microphone while you continue.
Okay. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Secretary Fagan for a motion on this particular item. Secretary Fagan.
Thank you, Governor. I move to approve the Malheur County land donation due diligence item.
Great.
I'm happy to second.
And we've got a second from the treasurer. And with that, the board will approve the department's recommendation initiating due diligence for the potential acquisition of 2,960 acres of irrigated meadow and dry rangeland in southern Malheur County for the purposes of cattle grazing and the conservation of the cutthroat trout. With hearing and seeing no objection, the motion is approved. All right, on to item number 3.
All right, we've changed out the microphones. Is that helpful? Oh, great. I know my voice is rather raspy this morning as well. Item 3, the Department of State Lands requests approval to initiate permanent rulemaking to amend the rules which authorize special uses on state-owned land. Through this rulemaking effort, communications site rules will be renumbered from OAR 141 to 125 to a new division, OAR 141 to 126, and be amended. There will be a subsequent new and separate rulemaking request at a later date to create and further develop rules relating to renewable energy, which are currently contained in OAR 141 to 125. The authorities are set out below. The summary here is the department's administrative rules for authorizing special uses on state-owned land have not been thoroughly updated since 2008. That's a long time ago. Though the division was opened in 2015 and 2017 to specifically address geothermal resources, the number of special use requests have increased since 2008. Examples of special use activities needing permits include harvesting of pine cones, firewood permits, juniper cutting, athletic events such as mud runs or competitions, scientific research activities, and the occasional filmmaking venture. Two categories which fall under the special use rules are susceptible to rapidly advancing technology. That would be our communication sites and renewable energy. Both are complex enough to warrant breaking out into separate rule divisions. Communication site leases include the towers and infrastructure supporting the communication services such as cell phones, VHF radio, seismic monitoring, Wi-Fi broadband, etc. Cell sites are the most striking example, but all may have some elements of the following issues: fluidity in equipment ownership and lease assignments, and the need, most importantly, to establish a modern fee structure in keeping with the industry. High frequency of lessees and subcontractors, and complexity with co-locating at communication sites. It's like a rodeo out there right now. So we want to have higher level of detail and adaptability in managing these sites. Therefore, the department recommends the State Land Board authorize the department to initiate permanent rulemaking to amend OAR 141-125 and OAR 141-126.
Thanks, Director Walker. Treasurer Reed, do we have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move approval of the recommendation to authorize the department to initiate rulemaking to amend 141-125 and 141-126.
Do we have a second?
Second from Secretary Fagan.
Hearing and seeing no objection to the motion, so ordered. And with that, Director Walker, we'll turn it back to you for item number 4.
All right, item number 4 on your screen there will probably be at page 14. This one is whether the State Land Board should authorize the direct release of 44.6 acres of subsurface minerals and geothermal rights in Marion County. You'll see that in Appendix A, owned by the Oregon Department of Administrative Services. And I'll give all the township range at the end. The authorities are set out below. On June 1, 2020, Department of Administrative Services requested the release of approximately 44.6 acres of subsurface mineral and geothermal rights at the former Hillcrest Youth Authority facility. DAS was in the process of marketing the property and sold the surface rights to Watch Hill Capital LLC this fall. DAS supports the release of the mineral rights and has requested DSL process those under OAR 141-073. The Land Board was informed of this request for release of minerals through an informational item in your August Land Board meeting of 2020. Public notice was sent out to adjacent property owners, local government agencies, and tribes. One caller asked about the project, but was satisfied once the notice was clarified. The city of Salem sent a letter stating the mining of minerals is not allowed under its current zoning. So good thing we're selling those rights. And the letter was forwarded to the applicant. The Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs expressed concern about potential ground disturbing activities. So the applicant was sent a brochure explaining their responsibility to protect those cultural resources should they come across them. On December 31, 2020, the department received a minerals potential report, Exhibit C, from Dogami, indicating low potential for high-value subsurface minerals for the property. ORS 273.780 sub 3 states that, except as provided in ORS 273.787, the mineral and geothermal resource rights shall be retained by the state in the absence of a finding by the State Land Board upon adequate facts presented to it that their sale or exchange is for the purpose of obtaining the greatest benefit for the people of the state, consistent with the conservation of lands under its jurisdiction under sound techniques of land management. There is not a period in that paragraph until the end. So there you go. The sale of those mineral rights for this property will provide the greatest benefit for the people of this state by enabling this property to be redeveloped to its highest and best use. At this time, department policy is to sell those mineral rights and geothermal rights for a land transaction fee at the rate of $10 an acre. The sale price for this transaction then is $446. I have asked staff to review the $10 rate and whether it should increase or at least be indexed to increase over time, because it sounds like it's not very much money. So we'll have a report on that for you later. The recommendation on this site, however, is great. The department recommends the State Land Board approve the direct sale of the subsurface minerals and geothermal rights to Watch Hill Capital LLC, located in Marion County at Township 8 South, Range 3 West, Section 12B, Tax Lot 1499 at the former Hillcrest Youth Authority facility.
Thank you, Director Walker. I was going to shift over to Secretary Fagan for a motion if there is one.
Thank you, Governor. I move to approve the request for a direct release of minerals and geothermal rights in Marion County.
Thank you. Secretary Fagan has moved for approval of the direct release of mineral and geothermal rights in Marion County. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, happy to second.
Great. We got a second from the treasurer, and hearing and seeing no objection, the motion is approved. I have next up item number 5. And so Director Walker, back to you.
Thank you, Governor. Item 5 is an interesting one. Excuse me. The issue is whether the land board should authorize the department to issue an access agreement to ODOT to create 8.14 acres of new lands within Upper Klamath Lake for the purpose of expanding Highway 140, which would result in the subsequent sale of the new lands created to ODOT. The authorities are set out below. On August 12, 2020, the department received a completed application from the Oregon Department of Transportation requesting permission to fill in 8.14 acres of submerged land and create new lands within the state's ownership of Upper Klamath Lake in townships 37 and 38 south, ranges 7 and 8 east, for the expansion of Oregon Highway 140. The request also includes 9.12 acres of submerged lands that will require a right-of-way easement for future maintenance of Highway 140. The proposed created new lands and submerged lands requiring a right-of-way easement are shown in Exhibit B. The highway in that location has seen flooding in recent years and also needed wider shoulders. OARs 141 through 068 requires that creation of new lands may only be done with the permission of the owner of the submerged lands on which they are created, as well as the permission of the adjacent upland riparian tax lot owner. In the project location, ODOT is the upland, ODOT is the upland riparian tax lot owner, and DSL is the owner of the submerged lands. This application underwent a 30-day public review process, and no comments were received. ODOT has also completed the removal and fill application process with the department and fulfilled their obligations of identifying mitigation locations through permit 61953-RF. ODOT coordinated extensively with the Klamath tribe during design of the highway project and compensatory mitigation plan. To complete this expansion project, ODOT must receive permission from the department and be issued a short-term access agreement for the construction period of the project. Once that agreement is in place, they can then solicit for construction contracts. Per ORS 274.932, a public body that creates new lands has the right to purchase those new lands within 1 year of their creation. The sale of new lands must be approved by the State Land Board, and the compensation for the sale of the new lands cannot be calculated until those new lands are created and then surveyed. So this is going to result in another request that will be before you all to approve the surveyed acreage and the price that we will be selling them at. For your history lesson today, Highway 140 is also known as the Lake of the Woods Highway. And thanks to the Secretary's office, it is the longest state highway in Oregon, running 237 miles from White City to Klamath Falls to Lakeview and then on into Nevada. So I love my history participation here. But most importantly, sections of the highway near the lake are a migratory route for the monarch butterfly as they head south in the fall to winter in Pismo Beach and other sites along the California coast. They know where to go to have fun. It is a sight to behold, as I once was caught in a migration in my vehicle traveling from Klamath Falls to Medford. I've never seen so many butterflies in my life. Monarchs are found on both the east and the west coast, but sadly the western population has dropped from the millions in the 80s to approximately 30,000 or so in recent years. So be sure to plant native milkweed in your landscape and participate in the community science assessment project at Washington State University. It's a research project called Monarch Mystery at wsu.edu to learn more. They're trying to learn more about the migratory habits of butterflies. So I'm going to return you to your usual programming and give you the recommendation for this project, which is the Department of State Lands recommends the State Land Board approve the department's issuance of a short-term access agreement to ODOT for the creation of approximately 8.14 acres of new lands within the state's ownership of Upper Klamath Lake in townships 37 and 38 south, ranges 07 and 08 east.
Thank you, Director Walker. Appreciate the history lesson and the participation from other land board offices. Clearly, the governor's office is going to need to step up and do a better job participating and providing historical facts. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Treasurer Reed to see if he has a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Always exciting to be talking about new lands. I move approval of the department's issuance of a short-term access agreement to the Department of Transportation for the creation of 8.14 acres of new lands in Upper Klamath Lake, townships 37 and 38 south, ranges 7 and 8 east.
Thank you. Is there a second from the secretary?
Second.
Great. With that, hearing and seeing no objection, the motion is approved. And then that moves us on to item number 6, request for final approval to sell a 20-acre parcel of the South Redmond tract in Deschutes County.
All right, Governor, thank you. You'll find that at page 49 on your screen, and I will give credit to Mr. Minor for giving me some hints and information about the Lahontan cutthroat trout. They're actually a beautiful species. So on to the Oregon Military Department. This is also a very exciting project. We have a lot of those today. The issue is whether the State Land Board should authorize the direct sale of this 20-acre parcel in Redmond to the Oregon Military Department, and you will see that as Exhibit A. The authorities are set out below, and we have Stan Hutchinson of the Oregon Military Department present to testify at the conclusion of my remarks. In 2015, the Oregon Military Department approached DSL to purchase a portion of the South Redmond tract for a new readiness center. The 900 plus acre South Redmond tract was in the process of being added to Redmond's urban growth boundary as part of a regional process that identified a shortage in the Central Oregon area of large lot industrial land. The location of the 20 acres needed by OMD is key to their operations and includes an easement to reach their military training ground on BLM land to the east. In the last update to the Land Board in October of 2019, completion of the due diligence reports for the sale of the large lot industrial lands was approved, and an update on the progress of a long-term collaboration with OMD was provided. An appraisal determined the value of this parcel to be $1,662,700, and a purchase and sale agreement has been executed between OMD and DSL, pending final approval by the Land Board. A cultural resources review was performed by the DSL archaeologist. Public notice of the sale was sent to local public agencies and tribal authorities, and only one anonymous objection was received to the sale, complaining that the property was going to be used for a military purpose. I suggest there's much more than a military purpose, and the military department will be able to share that, why this project is so important. The method of sale is a direct sale at appraised value. The department recommends the State Land Board authorize the direct sale of the 20-acre parcel located southeast of the intersection of Southwest 19th Street and Southwest Elkhorn Avenue at Parcel 2 of Partition Plat 2020-22, located in the northwest quarter of Section 33, Township 15 South, Range 13 East, City of Redmond, and Deschutes County to the Oregon Military Department for $1,662,700. And with that, I turn the floor over to our guest from the Oregon Military Department. Governor, if you're willing to entertain his testimony.
Absolutely.
Good morning, Governor Brown, members of the State Land Board. For the record, I'm Stan Hutchison, Director of Installations for the Oregon Military Department. I'm happy to be here today to request your support in commemorating yet another milestone along the path of providing a new National Guard Readiness Center for our citizen soldiers in Central Oregon. As you know, in order for us to be competitive in obtaining National Guard federal dollars necessary to construct a readiness center, we must first demonstrate the state has provided adequate land in which to build. By approving this proposal for DSL to sell 20 acres of the South Redmond tract to the Oregon Military Department, we will then be in a position to compete for a very viable project for federal fiscal years 2028 or 2029. In our line of business, we are all well versed in the length of time it can take to conduct land development planning and align real property acquisitions with programming processes necessary to obtain construction funding. It can be even more complicated with our agency as we marry up land acquisition opportunities with the U.S. Army's programming timelines. This journey began for us in 2006 as our agency collaborated with Deschutes County, the City of Redmond, and the Division of State Lands with a goal to dedicate a portion of this land to accommodate the replacement of our 65-year-old armory located in downtown Redmond. This alliance between state agencies and the local government continues today, and this project is now the Adjutant General's #1 ask of National Guard Bureau for an armory replacement. When constructed, this new readiness center will be a resilient facility that is more capable of surviving and being a local and state asset during earthquakes or other natural disasters. Not only will this facility be able to provide modern capabilities and storage space for the citizen soldiers to assemble and train, it will also be able to provide backup power, an emergency domestic drinking water well, and will incorporate renewable energies in order to offset electrical consumption. When not being used by the National Guard, our classrooms, commercial kitchen space, and assembly areas can be used by the community for local events. We are committed to providing a new readiness center that will serve as a local, regional, and state asset with features that will enhance and contribute to the future development of the other parcels within the South Redmond tract. In conclusion, the Oregon Military Department endorses this land sale and greatly appreciates the efforts of the State Land Board, the Division of State Lands, and the City of Redmond in making this important decision that will ultimately support the citizen soldiers of Central Oregon. This concludes my testimony, and I thank you for your favorable consideration of this land sale.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. Please let the tag know that we're incredibly grateful for his leadership on this project. We're also, frankly, incredibly grateful for our National Guardsmen and women that have helped us respond to wildfires this past year and have been a crucial part of our pandemic response, particularly right now, handling calls at the call center and providing vaccines at mass immunization sites. So incredibly grateful to our volunteer National Guardsmen and women for their service. And I personally am very excited about this project. I hope that the fact that the head of the U.S. National Guard comes from Oregon will give us a lift up in terms of this project, but we'll have to keep working and moving forward to make this happen. So thank you. Any comments or questions for Mr. Hutchison? Treasurer Reed, then it's, I think, oops, sorry, I'm having you all marked out so I don't get confused. I think it's Secretary Fagan is the motion. The floor is yours.
I've got this one, Governor. Thank you. The department, or I move to adopt the recommendation of the State Land Board to authorize the direct sale of a 20-acre parcel located southeast of the intersection of Southwest 19th Street and Southwest Elkhorn Avenue at Parcel 2 of Partition Plat 2020-22, located in the northwest quarter of Section 33, Township 15, South Range 13 East, City of Redmond in Deschutes County to the Oregon Military Department for $1,662,700.
Well done, Madam Secretary. Madam Chair, I second the motion.
Great. Hearing and seeing no objection to the motion is approved, and keep up the great work. And with that, we're going to move on to number 7.
Thank you, Governor. Before we do that, I did want to just update you on the Redmond parcel. We did recently sign a contract for the South Redmond property road construction and development. And the current schedule for that construction is to start in late February and be finished in late July. We're already marketing the large lot industrial land through our broker, Cushman and Wakefield. And that's expected to take a while because it's 200-acre industrial transactions don't happen every day, but they're a pretty darn good broker and have done well by us. And I'm really excited that we're going to be going forward with the OMD, and the county is also looking at the exchange they need to complete with us. So everything is on schedule with the South Redmond.
Great.
All right, we'll move on to item 7. Whether the State Land Board, and that'll be at page 65 on your screen, whether the State Land Board should authorize the direct release of 381.8 acres of subsurface minerals and geothermal rights in Linn County. You'll see that at Appendix A, owned by Oregon Water Resources Department. So more mineral rights, and we're going to save more wildlife. On March 23, 2020, Oregon Water Resources Department, on behalf of Oak Basin LLC, requested the release of approximately 381.80 acres of subsurface mineral and geothermal rights. The Oak Basin LLC owns the surface rights of a property located in Linn County at Township 14 South, Range 2 West, Section 19, tax lots 402 and 403, and in Section 30, tax lots 3302 and 3203. OWRD owns the subsurface mineral rights for the property. Oak Basin LLC is obtaining a conservation easement for the property with federal and Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife grants. This conservation easement is being pursued for permanent conservation of oak habitat and habitat for Fender's blue butterfly, an endangered species. In order to receive those grants, To purchase the easement, Oak Basin LLC must acquire the subsurface mineral rights owned by OWRD. OWRD obtained the mineral rights when a foreclosure occurred on a loan to the previous property owner and subsequently retained the subsurface mineral rights when the property sold. OWRD supports the release of the mineral rights and has requested that DSL process the minerals release request under OAR 141-073. The Land Board was previously informed about the potential for this in our June 9, 2020 meeting. Public notice was sent out to property owners, local government agencies, and local tribes. A neighbor wrote back in support of the project. The department received a minerals report from Dogami on December 31, 2020, Appendix C, indicating low potential for high-value subsurface minerals for the property. I won't read that statement again that I read previously, simply that ORS 273.780 sub 3 indicates that we need to, upon adequate facts, state that the sale or exchange is for the purpose of obtaining the greatest benefit. The sale of the mineral rights for this property will provide the greatest benefit for the people of this state through a release of the mineral rights to conserve oak habitat and habitat for the Fender's blue butterfly. At one time, the Fender's blue butterfly was thought to be extinct, and it only exists in the Willamette Valley, only here in Oregon in the Willamette Valley. In 1989, there were species were discovered to exist, and in 2000, it received an ESA listing. Due to recovery efforts, their numbers have grown from 1,500 now to nearly 25,000. So hooray for the Fender blue butterfly. And the oak Havanas, the savannas are very in short supply. Less than 3% of historic oak habitat remains in the Willamette Valley, and 98% of that 3% is located on private property. And Willamette Partnership works closely with those property owners to start an oak accord, to a voluntary conservation agreement by landowners in the Willamette Valley to protect and restore native oak habitat. That was launched in 2017 at Sokol Blosser Winery, and a number of wineries belong to that accord. So I'm very excited that DSL today is saving the oak and saving the Fender's blue butterfly with your approval today. The recommendation is the department recommends the State Land Board approve the direct sale of the subsurface minerals and geothermal rights to the Oak Basin LLC located in Lynn County at Township 14 South, Range 2 West, Section 19, tax lots 402 and 403, and in Section 30, tax lots 3302 and 3203. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Director Walker. Any questions from the board? All right, Treasurer Reed, I think it's back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move approval of the recommendation and of the direct sale of subsurface minerals and geothermal rights to Oak Basin LLC in Lynn County.
Great. Treasurer Reed has moved approval of the staff recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
I hear a second. That is good news. Hearing and seeing no objection, the motion is approved. And thank you. With that, we'll move on to item number 8, request for authorization to purchase 1.4 acres in Coos County.
Thank you, Governor. You'll find that at page 89 on your screen. Whether the State Land Board should authorize the acquisition of 1.14 acres adjacent to the entrance of the South Slough Reserves Visitor Center. You'll see that Exhibit A. and authorities are set out below. In the fall of 2019, the Coos County Forestry Department acquired this property by foreclosure for failure of the property owner to pay property taxes. The county removed a mobile home from the property and a considerable amount of trash, and then contacted the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve to see if it was interested in purchasing the property. The property fronts Seven Devils Road and includes the primary entrance driveway to the reserve's visitor center that is currently accessed only through an easement. On November 15, 2019, the reserve received approval from the SNR Management Commission to move forward with submitting a funding proposal to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, who is our partner at the South Slough, for this acquisition. The Ways and Means Subcommittee on Natural Resources approved the reserve's request to submit this funding proposal on November 20, 2019. In May of 2020, reserve staff requested input on the proposed acquisition from cultural and natural resources staff of the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, the Coquel Indian Tribe, and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. All replied with no concerns. On June 9, 2020, the Land Board approved the initial due diligence in Appendix B for the purchase of this property and the adjacent property with 0.56 acres that is still privately owned. An appraisal was conducted on the property along with a cultural resources review by the DSL archaeologist. Public notice of the potential acquisition was sent to adjacent property owners, local governments, and tribes. The Friends of South Slough wrote a letter in support of the acquisitions and confirmed their commitment to provide $25,000 for the project. That's in Appendix C. The reserve was delighted to receive award notification from NOAA on June 16, 2020. On August 10, 2020, Ways and Means Committee on Natural Resources approved the reserve's expenditure request for the federal grant funds for the acquisition. On January 19, 2021, the Coos County Board of Commissioners approved and signed a purchase and sale agreement committing to selling the property to DSL for $85,000. DSL will purchase the property with $60,000 funded by the grant from NOAA and $25,000 provided by the Friends of South Slough Reserve. South Slough Friends, the Friends, FOSS, they're known as FOSS. They're a terrific group of dedicated folks who support the work of the South Slough, and we're pleased to have their support. Negotiations are continuing with the private property owner for the 0.56 acres property at tax lot 500 adjacent to the Coos County tract, which is also adjacent to the reserve's driveway. This will really enhance the entrance to the reserve and allow for more buses and school children to come in once we have gotten past our COVID restrictions. Right now, we still have children come to the reserve, but they're in much, much smaller groups. The recommendation is, the department recommends the land board approve the purchase of tax lot 100 containing 1.14 acres of land adjacent to the entrance of the SNR, South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve Visitors Center. I'm done with that item.
All right, let's see, that means it's back to Secretary Fagan for a motion, or before that, are there any questions? All right, Secretary Fagan, it's yours.
Thank you, Governor. I move to approve the purchase of tax lot 100 containing 1.4 acres of land adjacent to the entrance of the South Slough Reserves Visitor Center.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I second the motion.
Great. Thank you, Treasurer Reed. With that, hearing and seeing no objection, the motion is approved. And so I believe that completes our action items, and we're on to the informational agenda.
You are correct, Governor, and that'll give me a chance to rest my raspy voice. We are going to move to item 9. It's page 106 on your screen, and it is the annual Common School Fund audit. And Tanya Moffett from Marina and Company will be on the screen. There she is, like magic, and we'll talk about the audit. Tanya, over to you.
Thanks, Tanya. Before you start, I just want to check in with the land board members. If you all have a question, feel free to raise your hand in the chat room and ask it. All right, Ms. Moffett, to you.
Thank you, Governor Brown, Secretary Fagan, and Treasurer Reed. I am here to report on the June 30, 2020 financial statement audit for the Common School Fund. I am happy to report that we had an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of a financial statement opinion that we can give. It's a clean opinion on the financial statements, and we issued that report on November 23rd, 2020. This year was a lot different than in the past in the fact that we did the audit 100% remotely. We did not go on site to the Department of State Lands offices. And so it was a little bit different for everybody to complete the audit. I'm happy to report that even with all of the nuances with doing a remote audit, we were able to complete it with no significant difficulties. Every time that we asked DSL staff for information, we received it in a very timely manner. There were no restrictions placed on our audit. Whenever we asked for something, we received it. There also were no disagreements with management, and there's no new accounting policies for the June 30, 2020 financial statements. Therefore, if you take the June 30, 2020 financial statements and compare them to the June 30, 2019 financial statements, you're comparing apples to apples. There are a few estimates in the financial statements, and the largest of that estimate is obviously the unclaimed property. We don't know how much of that is going to be retained for the Common School Fund and how much is going to be paid out, as well as there's an allowance for doubtful accounts. We don't know if the Common School Fund will receive everything that is in there. So those are the two large estimates in the financial statements. We didn't find any transactions that the Common School Fund entered into that lacked authoritative guidance. So they are following all of the governmental accounting standards appropriately. In some cases, management may decide to consult with an outside consultant or get a second opinion on certain situations. We are not aware of any such consultations with other accountants. We are thankful for the team at the Department of State Lands, that they're wonderful to work with. We want to thank Director Walker, Deputy Director Straight, as well as Star Thompson and former employee Lee Hollinger, and the accounting and unclaimed property teams. Without all of their help, we would not have been able to have a successful audit, especially in this time of doing it remotely. We have appreciated the opportunity to have been of service to you and look forward to potentially working with you in the future. Do you have any questions on the financial statements or anything that I can answer for you?
Any questions from the board? Treasurer Reed, Secretary Fagan? I don't see any. Thank you very much, Ms. Moffett. Really appreciate that report out.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Tanya. Governor, would you like me to move on to item 10?
Yep, annual real property report.
All right, we will have Deputy Director Bill Ryan present that. You'll find that at page 143 on your screen. And there's Bill with the river and the forest in the background. So take it away, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you. Good morning, Governor Brown and members of the board. For the record, my name is Bill Ryan. I am Deputy Director of Operations for the Department of State Lands, and I'm providing the summary of the fiscal year 2020 real property annual report. The purpose of the report is to provide the land board a year-end summary of the financial performance of the Common School Fund trust lands under the Department of State Lands oversight. The report provides the overall revenues and expenditures associated with these lands, which are a result of a broad range of real property management activities, including leases, easements, licenses, special uses, and land sales and exchanges. I won't go into exhaustive detail, but we'll hit the major points from the report. Table 1 on page 2 of the report shows the total lands managed by the Real Property Program, and it breaks them down according to whether they're trust lands versus statutory lands, and then by broad land classification. And those classifications include forest lands, agricultural lands, range lands, industrial, commercial, residential lands, what we call ICR lands, mineral and energy resources, which are subsurface ownership, and special stewardship lands. So the department owns and manages about 1.5 million acres of property. In terms of acreage, the largest land classifications are rangelands and the subsurface mineral and energy rights. In addition to providing revenue for the Common School Fund, the real properties managed by the department provide public use for recreation, hunting and fishing, conservation, open space and wildlife habitat, and benefit rural economies, for instance, through leasing of rangeland. The open space and the availability to the public is particularly important since many private lands that used to be open to the public are no longer available, or owners are charging fees for their use. So that is the open space and recreational use of our large land holdings is a significant value provided by them. I'd like to move on to take a look at the revenue picture. And the best way to do that is to go to Appendix B, which is page 151 of your packet. And that shows revenues, expenditures, and net operating income by land classification. The big picture continues to be about the Elliott State Forest, as it has been for recent years. The Elliott continues to act as a major drag on earnings due to the lack of revenue generated by the Elliott and costs associated with managing the Elliott and preparing it for the transfer to OSU. The total.
Bill,
yes.
I've got a question from Treasurer Reed.
Thank you, Governor, Madam Chair. I guess it's a little less of a question, but you really took the, I may have hit the hand raise a little prematurely because you kind of took the words out of my mouth, which is just to underscore how important that continued work with OSU is. When I was looking at this, that number really does stand out. And so I appreciate you making that point. I guess I went a little prematurely, but what an impact it has on the overall picture. So excited about that continued work with OSU.
Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the numbers really do tell the picture there, or tell the story there. The net operating income for fiscal year 2020 was actually negative $197,000, and that's really because of the costs associated with the Elliott State Forest. On the plus side, that is it's less of a negative than last year, and so that's a benefit, and that is because we did have some significant timber sales on non-Elliott lands, which actually our partners from ODF are going to report on after me. And also we had significant reduced costs for fire management on our rangelands. But still we had a negative of almost 200,000 for the whole portfolio. We do break down the forest lands costs because of how important that piece is to the overall picture. And so that's sort of at the bottom part of that Appendix B table. So certified forest lands contributed about $971,000 in net revenue, while non-certified forest lands and the Elliott resulted in net losses of $51,000 and $1.8 million respectively. As I mentioned, rangelands performed better as a result of decreases in expenditures, which is really because we didn't have a big fire year. And so that was helpful in terms of rangelands revenues. When considering land classifications other than the Elliott State Forest, the total net operating income for fiscal year 2020 was about $1.7 million, $1.6 million. So that really, once again, shows the difference of completing the transfer of the Elliott State Forest, what that will make for the portfolio. In addition to operating revenues, we had significant sales in 2020. We executed 2 field land sales, 1 mineral sale, and 2 industrial commercial residential sales, contributing $5.1 million to the land revolving fund. The sale of the Helvetia industrial commercial property in Hillsborough in December 2019 accounted for $4.2 million of that figure. So that was a big sale. The department also purchased the East Hackey Ridge Forest Lands parcel as a result of the Cascadia court decision, and that purchase was $2.4 million. So the net land sales revenues for 2020 were $2.7 million. Appendix C, which is the next page after Appendix B, shows market value and performance by land class. And really the picture here is that the real property portion of the Common School Fund portfolio is $584.7 million estimated value, and that's about 1/3 of the total value of the Common School Fund investment holdings, which at the time of the report were estimated at about $1.7 billion. And once again, the Elliott State Forest is a major drag on returns. The other land classes show low positive returns, which is consistent with performance for the past several years. Looking forward, we will be revisiting the real estate asset management plan this year. That's a 10-year plan that was adopted by the board back in 2012. So we'll work with the land board and stakeholders to revisit the strategies within that plan, and we'll plan on bringing it to the land board for adoption in February of 2022. We'll also continue work towards transfer of the Elliott State Forest. Also, we are partnering with the Board of Forestry in development and ODF in the development of the Board of Forestry Western Forest HCP, which will help with the ongoing management of our certified forest lands. We have roughly 32,000 acres of lands that would be part of that HCP. And we will continue to work with the Bureau of Land Management to receive the 1,500 acres of in lieu lands that are still owed to the state. And so we recently submitted, end of last calendar year, submitted a package to BLM showing more than 1,500 acres of lands that we might be interested in. And so we're waiting on a response from them on that. So we'll continue to work with them to get those lands into ownership and manage those or sell those as appropriate. We also will be working on bringing up the special use rates to market, part of the rulemaking that Director Walker mentioned, and also be looking at marketing lands for renewable energy uses. Our extensive holdings on the east side could be appropriate for wind or solar energy or transmission line locations. So there's some opportunity for revenues there as well. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Bill. Questions from the board? Treasurer Reed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder if Mr. Ryan, you could offer any early indications on the marketing around renewable energy opportunities. That's intriguing. I wonder if you've learned anything early on.
Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed, we don't really have any initial information. There is a study that's actually being spearheaded by DLCD using grants from the U.S. Department of Defense to look at potential for renewable energy generation statewide. And so the department is part of that effort. They're looking at the intersection of really Air Force and aerial, military exercises and the intersection of those with land uses and where that would be appropriate or not. Obviously, big wind turbines could be a problem if you want to do low-level maneuvers and that sort of thing. And so that report should be done toward the end of this calendar year, which should identify areas that are good or potentially good for renewable energy development. And we also have reached out to a firm that's associated with the what is NASTL now, Vicki? The National
Association of State Trust Lands.
Thank you. They changed their name recently, and there's a firm that is part of that organization that actually markets properties, energy properties. They focus primarily on natural gas and oil, but they also do renewable energy as well. And so we'll be working with them as well once we get the results of that ERISA report later this year.
Treasurer, I also saw an article that came out recently about some work in New Mexico. And so I've asked the staff to find out how their department, I think it's a DNR in New Mexico, is doing that work. And I know with the current presidential administration, the focus is going to be on renewable energy more so than it has been in the last 4 years. And Governor, I know you are chair of the Western Governors Association this year, and I suspect that transmission is still one of the issues that we're pretty concerned about. And I recall passing a bill in the legislature way back when that allows Oregon to build transmission lines and sell bonds to do so because it's in our constitution. So we're looking at how all those things intertwine and how we can improve those opportunities on state land.
Mr. Ryan, Director Walker, one suggestion that you've probably already thought of is to be in touch with SOAR Oregon and some of the aerial systems that are under development. We have a significant advantage in Oregon too, and Mr. Ryan's comment about aerial maneuvers reminded me of that. So being in touch with them is probably a good idea as part of that research.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Justin. All right. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Appreciate your time and energy, and great photo as a backdrop. So next item, Director Walker, is the Common School Forest Land Annual Report. It looks like we have Peter Doherty from the Department of Forestry to present. I'm going to take a quick break here and turn the gavel over to Secretary Fagan for a minute, and but please go ahead and proceed.
All right, thank you, Governor. You'll find this report at page 154 on your screen. So I'll turn it over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Vicki. Good morning, Governor Brown and members of the board. I am Peter Doherty, Oregon State Forester and Director of the Department of Forestry. Joining me at our virtual table is Liz Dent, State Forest Division Chief. We are here to brief you on the fiscal year 2020 outcomes from the portion of the Common School forest lands that we manage under an agreement with the Department of State Lands. We appreciate this partnership, which is strengthened with solid relationships at all levels of our organizations, beginning with Director Walker and myself through DSL and ODF boots on the ground foresters and technical staff. But before I turn it over to Liz, I'm going to take a moment to discuss the 2020 fire season, which turned into Oregon's worst natural disaster in recent history. The fires impacted all Oregonians and occurred in the midst of a global pandemic. Communities suffered devastating facilities, losses of homes, businesses, historical and cultural landmarks, infrastructure, and critical natural resources. The fire's footprint included a portion of the Santiam State Forest, burning roughly 16,600 acres, of which 403 acres are common school forest lands. Fire disturbance is expected in forest ecosystems, but the extent and severity of the 2020 season will significantly impact forest management for decades to come. While the Santiam is less than 2% of the acres burned in 2020, we are well aware of how important state-owned lands are to Oregonians. We are working collaboratively with DSL, our other state and federal agency partners, counties, stakeholders, and tribes on the recovery and the restoration of the Santiam, which is expected to take multiple decades. I'll turn it over now to Liz to brief you on the fiscal year 2020 financial outcomes.
Before we jump over there, are there any questions for Director Doherty? Okay. Go ahead, Liz.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. Governor Brown, members of the board, for the record, my name is Liz Dent, and I serve as the State Forest Division Chief for the Oregon Department of Forestry. And really appreciate Bill Ryan's report coming ahead of this one. I think it really sets the stage of sort of where State Forest fits in that portfolio of real property. So that really helps. So the department manages approximately 33,000 acres of common school forest land, and that's throughout the state, from the northwest corner in Astoria down to the California border and east into Klamath County. So really covering quite a range of sort of ecological conditions and rural communities. We manage these lands to create and maintain healthy, productive forests and forest ecosystems to meet the Common School Forest Land mandate, which Director Walker talked about already this morning in a snippet of as she laid it out, is the mandate is to provide Oregonians with the greatest benefit, consistent with resource conservation and sound management techniques. So we really keep that as a premise as we manage these acres in partnership with DSL. These are working forests, and they provide benefits for fish and wildlife. Timber revenue for the Common School Fund obviously is a critical benefit. Our management activities include the design, sale, and auction of timber sales, and then administering those timber sales as they are being conducted. Reforestation, many different stages of reforestation, road construction and maintenance, which includes providing fish passage at stream crossings, managing access easements, property line surveys, surveys for threatened and endangered species, public access in general, and again, echoing Bill Ryan's comment around access to public property and how valuable that is to the public, and then a robust public engagement and outreach process, which our stakeholders have become accustomed to. So I'll just highlight some of the financial outcomes today and put them a little bit in context. And I visited with you about this, or I brought this point up over the years of presenting our annual report. And that's that our financial outcomes are intrinsically linked to the timber economy. And that can fluctuate significantly with or without the type of events that occurred in 2020, one being the pandemic and the other one being the catastrophic wildfires. So we were prepared for the pandemic to have a significant impact on the revenue, the timber sales that we thought we'd be able to sell, and then anticipating revenue might go down. We put measures in place to control costs should that happen, and it really didn't pan out that way. The market remained fairly stable, which is really positive. 2020 fires, big post-fire activities include some harvesting of that burnt wood and then a massive investment in reforestation. And we know that that is across all land ownership. And so that's sort of the snapshot of, all right, after fire, what's in front of us for managing these lands? And so there's still some, time that needs to play out to see really what that results in, but we are planning timber sales of burnt wood and the massive reforestation that's in front of us. So with that introduction, really just hitting the high points of the financial outcomes from fiscal year 2020. The harvest level was about 5.6 million board feet, and that's an increase over 2019. We transferred $2.6 million to the Common School Fund, again, an increase over 2019. Our costs went up to $1.5 million. So those did increase as well over last fiscal year, previous fiscal year, resulting in $1.1 million to the Common School Fund, which again is an increase over the previous fiscal year. Looking to the future, we sold 11.7 million board feet in timber sales. So yet to be, the purchaser has 3 years to harvest those timber sales. And so that revenue will play out over time that comes in from that 11.7 million board feet. The value of that timber was 5.1 million. And that is estimated, obviously, prior to any management costs associated with managing these lands. And then finally, a look out for the next fiscal year. We do a revenue projection every year. We look out about 4 years. So the last projection was fall of last year. And we estimate a transfer of $5.9 million to the Common School Fund. If costs were to remain similar to as they were this past fiscal year, then that would mean that the Common School Fund would get $4.4 million in the upcoming fiscal year. Happy to take any questions.
Madam Chair, I wonder, if I might ask, Liz, can you give us a sense? Two questions that occurred to me during the presentation. One, they're both sort of related to your expectations around the economy and the impact on the revenue. So, in a general sense, if we look at the economic effect of the pandemic, one has been increased emphasis on real estate and remodeling and that sort of thing, and how that kind of plays out into timber markets. I wonder if you see that continuing or dissipating. And related to that, you mentioned when someone completes a timber sale, they have 3 years to complete the harvest. Do you ever see someone electing not to go through with it, and whether that might play into the first part of that question?
Okay, great. I'll attempt an answer to the first part of that question. That is our sort of working hypothesis, in that one of the reasons that the market has remained stable is exactly for those reasons that you're talking about. People are staying home, they can do more remodeling, that's how they're investing. So will that tail out? I would not want to venture a guess on that, because that's what it would be, is a guess. Let's see, your other question.
You got to give us something there, because that's part of how you're creating your strategy, isn't it?
I'll weigh in.
Oh,
Thanks, Treasurer Reed, Governor Brown. It is really hard at this point in time to make any forecast on timber prices. Not only do we have the outcome of the global pandemic and what happens there, but if, to put it in perspective, we had over 546,000 acres of land that ODF protects. The majority of that was private industrial land, and we're going to start seeing an impact on supply. There's going to be a short-term increase significantly in burnt wood, and we were concerned that that might affect our timber prices this year. We haven't seen that come out, primarily, I think, because State Forest has such good timber. It's still holding its value in this market. But going forward, there should be a big constriction in supply. And so we may see prices go up. But at this point, it's very hard for economists to predict what the future market's going to be as we see this event play out. I hope that helps.
Maybe I'll just add to that, specific to your question, Treasurer, which is, you're exactly right. For the projections, we have to make several assumptions. And those include housing starts, anticipated or assumed lumber prices, harvest timing, actual volume sold, volume planned. And the farther out in time our projections get, the less certainty, and you're fully aware of that. So for the timber prices, we base that on a previous 5-year average. So that's what we're going from right now in terms of our projection.
And how about the second part? Do folks complete an agreement and then not follow through? Does that ever happen?
Rarely, actually, but we have provisions in place for that. And so it's called defaulting on a timber sale, and then we take action to address that. What does happen maybe a little more frequently is a request to extend contracts. And so in that case, we, there's certain conditions under which a purchaser can ask to do that. And then we require, regardless, we require midpoint payments. So we are still addressing the cash flow issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Liz, could you talk about two quick things? One, perhaps more mundane than the treasurer's question. Talk to us a little bit about cost increases and what that looks like and why that's been a challenge. And then secondly, maybe not specifically with regards to common school forest lands, could you talk about the extent of replanting efforts and what that looks like for the department?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Governor. So with costs, I would say the main driver for our costs in the past fiscal year were an increase in survey costs associated with looking for the presence of threatened endangered species, namely northern spotted owl and marble murrelet. And then some of our expenditures from the Salem level also increased. And those were associated with largely with increases in technological support for the work that we conduct. And then overarchingly, the increase in costs was largely associated with the fact that we've been carrying about a 35% vacancy in our workforce for several years. And we did that while we reorganized our structure. And once we got that in place, and it took us about 2 years to do that reorganization, we started filling positions. And so that's also why we're seeing the cost increase. And I'm sorry, you had a second question.
Question on reforestation.
On reforestation. I think that I would put it in the context of the Santiam State Forest, where historically reforestation has involved about 500 acres, and we're looking at 3,000 acres now associated with the fire and the reforestation we already had planned. So that puts it in perspective. This is public land, so we're using a mixture of approaches. We're planting seedlings, which is a typical practice, and we're also using aerial seeding. It's cost effective in places where we just can't access the land, or the burn severity is such that it just makes more sense to do aerial seeding. And then some areas will do natural regeneration. They just are well suited to follow sort of the natural progression to recover those stand conditions. So using a mixture of approaches.
Thank you. I sort of jumped in. Secretary Fagan, any questions? All right. I don't know, unless Treasurer Reed has more questions. I don't have anything else. Really appreciate the information, the report out, and your work. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Director Walker, I think that leaves us as the only other item on the agenda is item number 12, which is other.
Right, and I deliberately kept things off because we had a long agenda today. I will just tell you that next meeting, we'll give you a report on the updated security measures we've been putting in place here at the Land Board building. We had OSP come over, Oregon State Police come over and do an assessment. They had done one previously some years ago, and nothing was implemented, so we decided we were going to implement some of those things. So we'll talk about that next time. We're right in the middle of them. But other than that, we are busy, and there seems to be no end in sight with our busyness. And it doesn't matter that we're doing everything virtually. The staff still is doing the work and doing it exceptionally well. So I want to thank our staff for preparing this report today, and our staff for doing the work that they do each and every day. It's a great team here. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Walker. And before we adjourn, Secretary Fagan, I neglected to have you introduce your Land Board assistant. I don't know if Molly's going to be your Land Board assistant or if she's here from your team, but please enlighten us.
Thank you, Governor Brown. Absolutely. This is Molly Woon, and she is already doing a great job as my Land Board assistant. So happy to have her with me, and so you'll see a lot of her.
Great. Thank you. Anything else to become before the board? And welcome Molly Woon to the Land Board. We look forward to working with you. Anything else to come before the Land Board?
I think we've concluded our business today, Governor. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you all very much. Please stay safe out there and keep up the great work.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.